Charles Darwin said it's not the strongest or the smartest of the species that survives, but it's the one that's most adaptable to change. And most people don't like change. I mean, how many of you remember using that cell phone that looked like a brick? Remember that cell phone? You could knock somebody out with it. Or when my kids got me that iPod Shuffle, it looked like a lighter. I returned it. I was used to the big boom box. And right now, we're using cameras that could fit on the tip of a pin. We're doing other things. We're jumping on AI. And I want to assure you of one thing. AI will not replace humans. It will replace humans who don't use AI. You've got to adapt to the different changes in technology and the things that are going to happen to you. Well, what I found out is in developing a solutions-oriented mindset, every company that I look at has to do three things. First, they have to repair what's not working. Once they repair what's not working, then they've got to adapt to the changing environment, and then they've got to perform at a high level. But in order to attain that solutions-oriented mindset, there's three things that have to happen. The first thing you have to do is you got to transform your thinking. You have to think differently. You can't be thinking in the same linear way you did. Once you transform your thinking, you step outside the box, the next thing that you have to do is optimize your assets. Now, your assets are every single person in this room. It's the technology you have in your brain. It is your family members. It's every single person that you know is an asset. And sometimes we don't think of them as assets. But you know what I found out? If you don't ASK, you won't GET. What's the worst thing that can happen? You got a 50-50 shot. Sometimes you ask and the perfect person says, yeah, I can help you. And then you beat yourself up because you should have done that before. And then the last is you've got to accelerate your connectivity. You've got to accelerate the speed at which you do your business and the speed at which you connect with other people. We don't have a 24-hour news cycle. It's like a 3-second news cycle. And same thing, we've got to capture people's attention on a regular basis. Well, on January 20th, 1995, I got in my family what is known as the call. And the call came from a guy named Harold Lewis. And my son Alex and his daughter Allison went to school together. So at all the school events, Harold and I would hang out and just talk. And he was a nice guy. He really didn't know what Harold did. Well, Harold called me on January 20th, 1995, and he said, you got to go back into practice. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you need to go back into practice. I'm going to send you a whole bunch of patients. See, I built the biggest practice in St. Louis, Missouri at the age of 24. And I traveled around the world and taught doctors how to build their practice, how to communicate more effectively, how to handle with their patients, how to market their business. See, but what Harold did was Harold was the president of National Sports Agency. And he called me to tell me I needed to go back into practice because the LA Rams were moving to St. Louis. He was going to get me the team. Now, I thought this was really cool. You know, my son was 5 years old at the time. I thought this would be cool if my dad did that. So I said, sure. I went back into practice. The Rams moved to St. Louis. They won the first 4 games at Busch Stadium. They lost every single game for the next 4 years. They were the worst team in the 90s. My patients would come into me and say, you know, Doc, can't you do something for these people? I said, you know what? I just keep them on the field. I don't play the game. Well, then we got another call. And the other call was that we were going to get a famous coach. The coach from the movie Invincible, Dick Vermeil, was going to come to the St. Louis Rams. We were losing his franchise. He was known for turning things around. Well, I decided I needed an icebreaker for the coach. How can I ingratiate myself to the coach? I got to come up with an answer. So I went home and studied the dictionary. I'm boring. Do you know there's 913 words in the English language that end in ship? Did you know that? I didn't think the coach knew that either. So I was going to go in and stump the coach. So I walked into Dick Vermeil's office, and I said, Coach, do you know that there's 913 words in the English language that end in ship? I said, what do you think is the most important? He looked at me and said, Doc, relationships, of course. See, he understood that you had to make sure the players knew that you cared about them before you could teach them. Now, isn't that the same in life? See, if people don't think that you truly care about them, they're not going to open themselves to possibility thinking, to the word what if it works. Well, the Rams were doing great. First three games, they were doing unbelievable preseason. All of a sudden, this guy, Trent Green, goes down with a season-ending knee injury, and everybody's in mourning. They come to my office at 6:30, and this guy walks in my office. His name's Mike Jones. Now, I was on the board of Mike Jones Foundation, so I would go lecture at his football camps where he would deliver football camps to inner-city kids. And he was a Mizzou graduate, great guy, came in. He walked in my office, and at 6:30, my son was always there with me so he could see all the players. And Mike Jones walked right in and said, Doc, we're done. We're going to lose. I looked right at him. I said, you know what? I've got real patients in this office, people that are positive. This is a place of healing. I said, if you can't be positive, you can't be a patient in my office. I said, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Let me know what you want to do. I walked out. My son looked at me and said, Dad, are you crazy? He's a monster. He can crush you. I said, Alex, Dad treats people. This is what I do. Mike plays football. That's what he does. But we both put our pants on one leg at a time. We're both the same. Well, little did I know that Kurt Warner was about to come on top. Why? Because every single coach was against Kurt Warner except for Dick Vermeil. He showed the same fortitude as he did with Vince Papale when he played for Philadelphia. Nobody thought he should play, and he was behind him. It's that Jiminy Cricket. It's that sense. It's when you took that test and you changed the multiple choice test from the right answer to the wrong answer because you didn't listen to your gut. Sometimes we got to trust our gut. Well, he trusts his gut. And they turned into the greatest show on turf. And with 6 seconds left in the Super Bowl, Kevin Dyson drops back to pass to Kevin Dyson, and sure enough, Michael Jones on the 1-foot yard line makes the winning tackle in the Super Bowl. One of the most famous plays in Super Bowl history in my book, Living a Championship Life, and it was there. See, but when Mike came in there, I said to him that day, you can't be a patient in my office, but I also said, if you can't, then you must. If you must, then you will. How many of you have said something and realized you just turned into your parents? Anybody have that experience? That's exactly what came out of my mouth. Well, the end of the story was my attorney calls me up and he says, we're playing this golf tournament. Can you invite a bunch of your players? I said, sure. I'll invite Mike and a bunch of other people. My attorney had a lobotomy when it comes to sports. He knows nothing about sports. So he calls me up and he's complaining. He's got to go to the airport. He's got to go pick up this guy, this VIP guy. Who's the VIP guy? Tommy John. I go, you're going to pick up Tommy John, World Series, New York Yankees? I want to go play with you guys. Well, sure enough, we go play, and he's telling these great George Steinbrenner stories, and we're going back and forth. He looked at Mike and said, what were you thinking with 6 seconds left in the game? He said, all I thought was, I can, I must, I will. He said, you see this guy, the most annoying guy I've ever met. He says these things thousands of times. That's all I had in my brain. So you never know when you're going to say something that's going to make a big difference and impact on someone's lives because words are that strong. Well, then I got back to St. Louis. I moved down to Florida after that. And I was dealing with my family. These are my kids and my mom. And we have that golden rule of communication. You know how you had the golden rule? Do unto others as others do unto you? How many believe in this rule? Raise your hands. Stupid rule. Think about this. For those of you who had children, would you treat all your children the same exact way? Some need a little push. Some say, get out of my way. Let me do my thing. So my wife said to me, you spend all this time with Alex. He gets to go behind the bench. He knows all the players. You need to spend more time with your daughter. So I said, okay, I'm going to take my daughter away for 2 weeks. Take a little trip. We're going to go to Europe. I have a disease you have to know about. It's called OTT, over the top. Everything gets much bigger. Well, 2 weeks turned into a month, and I decided to take her. Well, the night before, we're in Indianapolis at the National Speakers Association convention. I decided I got to get to St. Louis, get her ready. She's never been out of town before. I get in the cab, and all of a sudden, my phone rings. Dad? Yeah, what's up, Jammer? No offense. Has anybody ever gotten that no offense line? I'm immediately offended. I want to hang out with my friends. So you can come tomorrow. Now, I give the cab driver $5. I rebook my plane ticket. I go and I rebook the hotel because I'd already checked out of the hotel. I call my ex-wife. I said, you know what? She's not going to need her computer. The next day, we get to the airport. At the airport, she didn't know I was writing a book called The Dad's Guide to Traveling with a Teenage Daughter, Generation Y. Like, why would you do it? It's crazy. When we got to the airport, we're in the St. Louis airport. I looked at my daughter and I said, my phone's not working. I need your phone a second. Give me your phone. She gave me her phone. I said, now you have to talk to me for a month. So we went from St. Louis to Chicago, London, Paris, Rome, Florence, San Gimignano, Chianti, Madrid, Israel, and back. Everywhere we went, this child would collect strangers, complete strangers, invite him out to dinner. Well, we're in Florence, and I said, tonight we're going to get home before 1:30 because every night we're out at 1:30 in the morning. I go to bend down, I throw my back out. So now we go into this restaurant, and the restaurant just had bar stools. Well, I can't sit on these bar stools, so what do? We go into another restaurant. We're in the other restaurant. I sit down. This woman comes walking up to me and says, Doc, look at my knee. This was the patient from hell, the one that you pick straws to get stuck with. She's right in there. She looks at my door. She says, you remember my friend? Our friend owns this restaurant that I wrote the most scathing review on TripAdvisor for that the whole family will never forget about. And then she looked right at my daughter and says, Doc, is this your girlfriend? Oh, gross. My daughter is completely grossed out. There's people behind her that are just laughing and crying. My daughter turns to them and says, hey, you want to go out to dinner with us tomorrow night? Next thing you know, we're in a restaurant with 6 strangers eating dinner with the owner of the restaurant. My last night in Florence, my daughter says, Dad, we make a great team. I knew I hit the ball out of the park with that. And my book, A Dad's Guide to Traveling with a Teenage Daughter, didn't come out. It became Jamie's Journey, Travels with My Dad. Went to #4 on Amazon. We did the Today Show. We did TV, radio. And on Father's Day, we promoted her book on the Today Show. And she gives advice to other kids. Jamie's Gems. You know when your parents are annoying? Hang in there. You may learn something. Or Rick's Revelations. Be flexible. You may have to change things. Well, then I got another call after this because my life's a little bit crazy. So I got another call. And the call was from these guys. And they came down, and it was on July 20th, 2011, 2010. I got the call again. They said, hey, you should go back into practice. You should go help these guys. Well, I went and we got to go speak. We got to hang out. I got to spend time with the greatest show on earth, and now the greatest show on turf, and now the greatest show in basketball. And this was right before we lost to Dallas. Everybody was all excited. Everybody was happy. And then we lost because people's heads were too big. They thought they were just the best. They were going to win on ego alone. Well, the next day, LeBron James defended himself. But what he said was that at the end of the day, all these fans are going to wake up tomorrow. They're going to go back to their miserable lives, and I'm going to still be me. And then he left town. Boom, left town. Now, 3 months later, he comes back, and he's in the locker room, and he's complaining about everybody and anything that you could ever imagine. Now, you could take the New Yorker out of New York, but you can't take New York out of the New Yorker. And I've got about this much patience. And again, it was bubbling up. It was filtering out. And next thing you know, I just kind of snapped, and I took LeBron James shorts. And I put his shorts on. And then I began to lecture him. And I said, you know what? You're never going to win a championship. I said, you know, I was with the Rams when they went from worst to first. I worked on their brains and their bodies. I said, but the difference is they play like a team. I said, you don't play like a team. You don't share the ball. You don't do anything. The enforcer, Udonis Haslam, he looked at me and said, Doc, get out. So I walked out with the shorts. Well, they went on to be the greatest team ever. They were winning every single game. And at the end, we won the championship. And they talked about something called symbolic focus. And symbolic focus could be a trophy, an award, something that people rattle around. Well, they had this rumor about a trophy. And on it said, together, trust, all in, tough. And it had 16 notches in it. And they would make a new gold notch every single time they won a game, but they wouldn't celebrate until there was 16 because they celebrated before and they lost. Well, when there were 16 gold notches, they won the championship. 2 weeks later, there's a knock at my door. And in it is a box, and the box has this trophy. And I look underneath the trophy, it says #1 out of 4,000. I know President Obama did not get #1. I got it. And then I looked in the box. There was a card. I pulled out the card, and the card said, here's a symbol of our appreciation for your guidance and support. Hey, Doc, you can keep the shorts, LeBron. He wasn't getting them back. The next year, everything was much happier. See, but the bottom line is, everything is about relationships. You want to make a change in your family, you want to make a change in your business, you've got to build relationships. If you give to get, you're even. If you give expecting nothing in return, you're way ahead of the game. Every one of you is way ahead of the game by being here today. Thank you so much.